Welcome to Trojans Networking Day. A few housekeeping items for today. For this webinar, a few housekeeping items. Your video and audio have been muted. Please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions. Some of our speakers may use the polling function, which will populate your screen. And this webinar will be recorded for you to share with other USC Trojans. Good morning. My name is Lori Shreve Blake, and I'm the Senior Director for Alumni and Student Career Services at the USC Career Center. Thank you for joining Trojans Networking Day. Before we begin our program, I'd like to welcome Patrick Auerbach, Senior Associate Vice President of the USC Alumni Association, who will give a brief welcome. Patrick?
Thank you and good morning, Trojans. Good morning. I wish I were on campus right now with the Alumni House behind me, but I just want to welcome everybody and hope everybody is faring well during these very uncertain times. I want to congratulate all of our class of 2020 new graduates who are the newest members of a USC Alumni Association, which now has more than 436,000 alumni members around the world. Many thousands of these alumni will be on hand a little later on in our program, actually at about 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, to begin to network with you as you're going to learn about many of the offerings we have here on T2T Networking Day. But want to thank all of you again for taking the time to be with us. You're part of this amazing Trojan family. And today's intention is to work with all of you to get you acclimated to our wonderful network of Trojans, to teach you give you some advice and teach you some skills for how to best utilize and access this wonderful Trojan family of ours through our Trojan Network platform. So once again, welcome. You're now members of the USC Alumni Association if you have graduated and your degree has been conferred. For those of you who are current students, we're wishing you all the best. Before too long, you too will be graduating from the university and will become members of the Alumni Association. And this is your best opportunity while you're still in school to start building that Trojan network and getting ready for a lifelong and worldwide experience of having the greatest alumni community right at your fingertips. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Lori. Thank you once again, and fight on.
Thank you, Patrick, and fight on. We hope that today's programming helps you gain a better understanding of how you can not only tap into the Trojan network, but also continue to grow your personal network through the Trojan Network platform. Our first webinar is Virtual Reality, Navigating Networking to Working from Home. The job landscape is moving into the digital world, from an increase in virtual networking to employees working from home permanently. Alumni share tips for success in navigating this new virtual reality. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our first speaker, USC alumna, Maisha Cannon. Maisha?
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, 2020 grads and fellow alumni. If you could grab your cell phone and go to menti.com, it's there at the top of your screen, MENTI. And when you get there, enter that 6-digit code. I would love to do a check-in and see how everybody is feeling on this Thursday morning. So with your mood check, you'll select one of the options and be sure to hit that blue submit button, and then I'll be able to see how you're feeling here on the screen. Give you about 45 seconds for everybody to get acclimated. Awesome, I'm seeing those come in now, thank you. Yes, got some curious folks, yes. Some are sleepy, some are feeling kind of studious, some happy people. Okay, good, it's a good mix coming in. I still see them coming in, so we'll see where we land in a couple seconds here. Awesome. Well, good. We're equally distributed across moods. So awesome. I always love to do that with my team. I manage a distributed team of three who sit in 3 different cities. So I love doing mood checks just to kind of see where everyone's head is at. So thank you for participating in that. Keep your phones nearby. And we're going to welcome you to Plot Twist, Launching Your Career During a Pandemic. These are 3 simple strategies that will help you elevate your work from home experience, whether you're a new grad or a current alumni. So I have a few questions for you before I get started. I would love to kind of see where you all are. In that same Menti app, so let me know what your current situation is. Are you already working? Are you looking for work? I'll give you about 30 seconds and we'll see where we land here. Good, a lot of something else. So maybe people taking time off, maybe going to graduate school. Good. Lots of offers accepted. That's exciting. Congratulations on your signing day for those who have accepted new job offers. And most of you are actively searching. That's really good to know. Okay, just going to take a few notes here. I'm a note taker at heart, so I'll be taking notes as I learn from you. So active searching, good. That's great to know. So 14% working remotely. Okay, and 27, so good. So this content that I've designed will be applicable to all of you. You'll have to customize it a little bit, right? This is designed with someone who's working from home currently or expecting to shortly. So those who are in that active job search, definitely feel free to kind of remix this content and let it apply to your networking and job searching. I think you'll find some value in it as well. All right, one more question before we launch in. As you think about working from home on a full-time basis, what comes up for you? What's top of mind in terms of your most pressing concerns? You can rank all 6 if all of them are relevant to you, or just rank your top 3, really looking to see kind of what our collective pain points are as it relates to working from home. Thank you. Remember to hit that blue submit, and then we'll get the results here. I'll give you another 45 seconds or so for this one. Thank you. I see those coming in. And if you finally got to your cell phone and got it charged up, you can join us at any time at menti.com using that code at the top. We'll be using this for the duration. So if you got in late, it's okay. Lack of motivation during the day is coming in at number 1. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that self-motivation part. And then that routine is coming in, looks like across the board at number 2. And then that lack of, human interaction. Distractions, okay. Interesting. Okay, good. I'll give you another 10 seconds. Looks like we have a good amount, good quorum here with 193 votes in. So this is really, really helpful. Thank you for this. This gives me a lot of insight. So I'll be referring back to this during the day. So interruptions actually took over the loneliness. Okay, good. Just processing it all. All right. So hopefully by the end of today's session, you will have a strategy or a practical resource that you can now apply to your number 1 concern. That's my hope. So I am Maisha Cannon, graduated from USC. Definitely, it was 2011 when I finished my coursework, walked the stage in 2012. That's me in pink. And I've been working in human resources and recruiting since the 1900s. 1994 BG to be precise. That's before Google, if you can even imagine such a time. Now, in my current role, I lead the talent sourcing team at a global SaaS company headquartered in Santa Barbara, California. And I've worked remotely for almost 3 years, first from Henderson, Nevada, and now from Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm coming to you live from Canada this morning. So in the next 25 minutes, my goal is to share information, start a conversation, and really spark a transformation in the way that you're thinking about working from home and launching your career as a new 2020 grad. Now, to keep today's session interactive, I'll be using this tool called Menti. I see some of you are familiar with it already, which is great. And I'd love to continue to get your thoughts along the way. So keep your cell phone handy. Now, you may have noticed in the Menti web app, there is a heart in the center of the screen, whether you're using your phone or your tablet. Can you tap that heart to let me know you see it there? Good, 37 folks already know Menti, I love it. So I encourage you to tap that heart, thank you so much, to let me know if you've heard something that resonates with you, or maybe even something that I say that sparks an even better idea. Or finally, if you just want to let me know that you're present here with me, tapping that heart can substitute for the smiles and the eye contact and the head nods that we would normally share if we were together in person. And for those of you who majored in public speaking, you know how important those cues are when you're on center stage. So for the next half hour, I will not be checking my work email, texting my friends, or holding sidebar conversations. And hopefully you won't either. Now, at the end of today's conversation, I will give you a belated graduation present. It's a work from home, new grad swag, and it's a digital download that will contain over 35 resources that I've curated, from tools and apps to articles. And hopefully these will supplement the strategies that we'll discuss briefly this morning. All right, awesome. So this morning, we're going to talk about these 3 simple strategies. The first is how you can start to overcome some of the obstacles that you're facing as you're job searching and also getting set up with your work from home routine. Then we'll explore a few ways in which you can optimize your daily outcomes. Finally, we'll talk about how you can start to own your professional development as you enter the workforce remotely. All right, so in this section, I have a couple of ideas for us to discuss, and they're before you. And I want to start with the hard part. And I want to acknowledge that there are some unique circumstances that 2020 graduates face that no other graduating class in our recent past have really dealt with head on. And I recognize that there is a lot of uncertainty, from canceled internships to rescinded job offers, and even layoffs within our immediate family units. Now, while I don't know the particulars of every circumstance or emotion that you're experiencing, I want you to know that I am part of your extended Trojan community, and I'm here and available to support you and serve as a resource as you work through this time. I'll let you read what novelist activist James Baldwin said about facing challenges. Thank you for those hearts. This resonated with me too when I saw it a couple weeks ago on Instagram. Now, when we think about the concerns that you have about working from home, taking a step to just jot down the issues you're grappling with is a solid first step towards addressing your challenges. It may look something like this. This is just something I put together using Evernote. And on the left, I started with issues, and over time, not all at once, I started filling in the gaps, those potential solutions, things that I could do to address that face-to-face, person-to-person contact that I might be missing. And it's important to tackle the issues that you're expecting head on. Ignoring the issues when you're working remotely will only build frustration. And that frustration will likely come out in your interactions with your new teammates. So write it down, talk about it with your peers, use your extended network, and get creative about finding solutions. Now, the next part of overcoming your obstacles is to really lead with your strengths. Now, when we shine from afar, we demonstrate our strengths even though we're not in the room. But wait, is that even possible? Let's see. One of my strengths is creativity. And I hope it's coming through in this conversation, even though we're not in the same room, same city, or even the same country. Tap the heart if you are observing my creativity on display. Awesome, thank you. We still have some non-believers, so stay tuned. So we've talked about my strength and how I'm displaying it from afar. Talk to me about your strengths that you've cultivated over your time at USC, or even if you're an alumni that's been in the job market a few years. Hop into the app and list a couple of strengths, and be sure to hit that submit button. And let's see what we're working with. Beautiful, beautiful. Time management, yes. These are all quite transferable. Public speaking, good. Vulnerability, fantastic. Wow. That is absolutely a strength. And mirror and pair that with empathy for what we're all facing right now. Bravery. I love this, bringing people together. Beautiful. Yes, determination. Thank you for sharing these. If you haven't hit submit yet, click submit before we move to the next slide. And when I download the slides from today's presentation and add them to your swag bag, this word map will be there so we can kind of reflect on our crowdsourced strengths this morning. Now, speaking of resilience, during the Great Recession of 2009, I was working remotely from Southern California, recruiting clinical dietitians for schools and hospitals. I had just returned from a birthday trip to Jamaica, and I noticed on my calendar an early morning call with my manager who was based on the East Coast. On a random weekday at 7 a.m. over the phone, I learned that I was being laid off after 18 months at the company. Now, this was my third layoff in what was at that time a 15-year career of progressive growth. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. I'm sharing this because I don't remember anyone telling me early in my career that it's okay if your career path is not linear. Now, it's wonderful if you are fortunate to leave USC, land your dream job, and stay at the company for 10, 15 years. That is fantastic. However, that's not everybody's path, and it won't be, especially this year. But a plot twist in a story doesn't mean the story won't end well. Keep cultivating optimism, learn from every experience, and lead with your strengths. Eventually, you will find ways to turn those lemons into lemon bars. Yes, you can make lemonade if you want, but I'm going straight for the dessert. So we're at about the 11-minute mark. How is your energy level? Go ahead and stand up, stretch. I mean, you're off camera, you're on mute. Take a quick break, do some jumping jacks, grab some water, find your fuel. And I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna take a sip of water here while you stretch. Now here's a fun fact as you wrap up your stretch break. I have a monthly meeting on my calendar at work that is 4 hours on Zoom. Now that meeting has taught me that it's really important to know when I'm hitting a wall with my energy and with my attention span. Don't let your energy drop all the way down so you can avoid this Zoom video fatigue that a lot of us are experiencing. Same as your cell phone, right? You won't let the battery get down to 2% before you start looking for the charger. Well, some of you may do that, but you get my plan. On to strategy 2. I chose this picture because of the color on his walls. Isn't it energizing? That turquoise is phenomenal. I also appreciate the way he's dressed as he's working from home. And I highly recommend that you go business casual your first few months on the job and continue to observe and see how your teammates show up, but start off on the right foot. I was taught early in my career to dress for the role you want, not the role you have. And as USC alumni, let's avoid this popular viral trend of business on the top, party on the bottom. Like, don't do it. Anything can happen during a call. Fire alarms could go off, a delivery arrives, or a child comes into the room and you just abruptly and naturally stand up and rush off before you turn off your camera. So be safe and don't embarrass yourself. So let's talk about how you can structure your workspace and your work day, and also start to prioritize self-care when you're working remotely, and also job searching remotely, because job searching is a full-time job, in case you didn't know. So the point of emphasis I'd like to make here is just to keep your workspace ergonomic. Whether you have a dedicated home office or you're converting the corner of the living room or the bedroom into a small kind of mobile standing desk nook, just keep it ergonomic. I chose this picture because this young lady is already having back pain from not being set up properly. I'm sure you can notice what's wrong with her setup. I noticed that she needs a laptop riser, right? So that the monitor is at eye level. And maybe there's even too much sun coming in from that window. It's a beautiful window, but it may not be optimal for work. For me, the essentials are a comfortable chair, strong Wi-Fi, and a quality headset. Now, for you and your colleagues, your home office environments will vary greatly since, again, many people have been forced into working remotely due to COVID-19 restrictions. And when I tell you that no one has this figured out, not me, not your new manager, and certainly not your new teammates. So you'll need to activate patience and understanding because we're all learning to adjust together, both new grads and experienced vets. So now that you've structured your workday, let's talk about how you might approach scheduling your workday. And this applies after you've gone through onboarding and your schedule becomes your own. Now, for me, the most important thing you can do when you're new and adjusting to working from home is to ask yourself at the end of every day, what worked and what needs work? Recently, when we transitioned from work from home to working from home during a pandemic, and yes, there's a difference, I saw my average daily Zoom call go from 5 a day to about 11 a day. One week, I was consistently 5 to 7 minutes late for the majority of my calls. So I had to ask myself, what works and what needs work? I decided to start blocking off 30 minutes on my calendar after every 90 minutes of consecutive Zoom calls. I also changed my settings in Google Calendar and defaulted to 25-minute meetings instead of 30, just to give me 5 minutes to just stretch and get a breather and reset between calls. So I started feeling a little relief, and now I'm going to take it a step further and start converting some of my Zoom meetings to emails, Looms, or Google Docs to give myself and my team time back in their day to actually do the work we're being paid to do. Here's a sample Loom that I sent a colleague. I was explaining something that was a little too long for an email, but not really long enough to merit a 30-minute invite. So it was 3 minutes rather on Loom, and I sent it to him and we were able to get it done asynchronously. Here's a sample routine that will be in your swag bag, and it can give you some ideas on how you might want to structure your day or maybe spice up your existing routine. So let's talk about prioritizing self-care. Now, as you can see from the benefits here, self-care is all about maintaining your physical, mental, and emotional wellness. And establishing boundaries around your work-life integration takes so much more thought and effort when you're working from home than it does in a traditional office setting. One reason for this is that you don't have the social cues at home that you do in the office. A teammate of mine mentioned that when she was working in the office before we started social distancing, she knew it was lunchtime when she'd hear a buzz behind her and people heading to the elevator in groups of 3 and 4. That became her cue to pause, close her laptop, and grab her lunch from the kitchen. But when you're working from home, you don't get those gentle nudges. You have to stop yourself or use an app to remind you when to take breaks, when to eat, when to stretch, and even when to reset. So in addition to just taking breaks and eating lunch, what are some other ways that you can practice self-care when you're working from home? Maybe some of you are already doing it. We would love to learn from your collective wisdom on this call. I'll give you about 60 seconds to type in a few ideas into Menti. I love that, walk my dog. And then hit that submit button so we can all see it. Oh, feed my fish. Yes, that's so fun. Music for the win, absolutely. I wake up to music and go to sleep to music. It's a great way to practice self-care. Absolutely. I'm grateful for these insights. Keep them coming, keep them coming. I mean, the beauty of you entering the workforce right now is that as new graduates, you have fresh ideas that people like me who have been in corporate America for 20 plus years just won't have. And as you enter the workforce, you'll be able to come in, quickly adapt, and then make recommendations that help shape the future of what remote work looks like at your company and potentially for your industry. Ah, look at that beautiful word cloud. It looked like a brain for a minute there, a cloud. I love that. Thank you for your contributions. So for this final strategy, we're going to talk about how you can own your development. And your personal development kind of takes shape in a new way when you're working remotely. Here are two ideas. They aren't all inclusive, obviously, in the interest of time, but two ideas to get you started. So congratulations, you've graduated and your formal education has ended, and now the more practical learning begins. So much to learn when you enter the working world. Now, in the earlier survey, I noticed some of you mentioned that maybe being bored or not having enough work was a concern. I encourage you to spend any downtime you have during the week, and you will have downtime, spend that time immersed in learning. Start with what we call the lowest hanging fruit. So your company's website, the handbook you were given when you were onboarded, the company's YouTube page, the employee directory, the intranet internally to your job. Start there and then expand your circle of learning to some of the things you see there before you. And when you find yourself underutilized during work hours, watching TV or playing games on your phone are not the optimal way to go. Okay, when you're being paid to work, you really have to turn up that self-motivation and dig in. Thank you for the hearts. Now, when I was a junior at Crenshaw High School Gifted Magnet in my hometown of Los Angeles, my computer science teacher recommended me for a part-time job that I could work during my last 2 periods of the day and into the evening. Fun fact, that first job was at USC with the Computing Services Department. Oh, I still remember all the tickets I got parked on Jefferson when I forgot to feed the meter. The good old days. Now, I don't remember the name of the USC employee who trained me, but I clearly recall her saying to me and the 2 or 3 other students from local high schools who were being trained together, when you finish your assigned task, never be caught standing around idle. She said, if there's nothing to do, and I'm using air quotes, you grab the Windex and a paper towel and you wipe down the surfaces in the mainframe server room or in the computer labs. And I think Levy Library at that time had just gotten internet. So it was kind of a big deal for me to be working there. But anyway, I digress. That simple advice has helped cultivate resourcefulness in me to this day. And I'm so grateful for that lesson. So take initiative. There's always something to learn, especially when you're new. Sidebar, in another exciting plot twist, I returned to USC 12 years later as a full-time employee. And that time I was working in auxiliary services after I left E-Entertainment. And I think it was called Trojan Services back then. As you're owning your own development, remember to contribute. Be present in meetings. Don't attempt to multitask. Multitasking is not a thing. Google the phrase later, multitasking is a myth, to see what I mean. Now, I want to remind you here that many companies were not ready or set up for remote work, okay? They've just been thrust into it because there are no other options. And although we've seen many cutting edge tech companies like Slack, Twitter, and Facebook say that they're going to continue with remote work long-term, there are as many or more companies that are just not mentally prepared for shifting that way in the long term. And that's why it's imperative for you to contribute to your team every day. Speak up, ask questions, and be transparent with your manager about how you're spending your time. I have a resource in your swag bag of a daily one-on-one doc that I use with my 3 direct reports. I don't see them every day, but every day I ask them a question about what they're working on. And every day they tell me what their high and their low was, as well as any challenges. So use this one-on-one doc. Be proactive and offer it to your manager. I'm sure they'll be impressed because they're managing a lot and they may not have even thought that it could be a resource or a shared Google Doc that they could provide for you. Don't assume that your manager has all the answers, right? Because some of them are managing distributed teams for the very first time. On top of that, they're juggling parenting young children, homeschooling, or caring for elderly parents. So check your swag bag for those resources on how you can get off on the right foot with your new manager as a remote employee. Now, the final part of this Own Your Development strategy is to connect. Stay connected. There's so many tools you can use and so many spaces where you can thrive in your company once you land a role. Now, I'm talking about spaces you can thrive, like the employee resource group in your company, or Slack channels that encourage bonding over shared interest. And attending virtual events with your extended team can really build strong bonds. You may not think about it because it's not in person, but let me give you an example. I'm not a happy hour person when I'm working in an office. I come from the old school. I don't drink with colleagues. But when we talk about a happy hour that's virtual, oh yeah, I'm all over it. This is a Jeopardy game I put together for my team. The link is in your swag bag. It's a free template online. We had a great time. We actually call it a happiness hour to be inclusive and sensitive to people who don't want to drink alcohol. And we have a good time. There's so many games you can play with your virtual teams, and hopefully this will be a resource that you can utilize. You'll also see this in your swag bag, which is just ways for you to start kind of artificially recreating those spontaneous moments that you miss when you're making coffee in the community kitchen in the morning, or when you're doing this, water cooler catch up during the day. You can repurpose some of your time on your schedule and reach out to your teammates and really try to forge relationships virtually if you give it a little bit of thought. And there's just a couple ideas to get you started. All right, so it's about that time. You're about to see the teacher in me come out because we're about to have a pop quiz. So let's review what we just talked about. So enter your fun quiz name. I'll give you about 45 seconds. There is a name in the app already assigned to your little emoji, but it's in gray, so you can type over it. Type over it, type your fun quiz name there, and hit the join quiz button. It's blue if I remember correctly. Give you another 15 seconds. And if you don't get to type in a custom name in time, don't worry about it. You'll be assigned a random name and you can still play along. All right, we got 177 contestants. Ooh, this is kind of like a little dream. I'm hosting a game show. This is kind of cool. Okay, focus, focus, focus. Okay, I'm gonna hit the start quiz button now. You ready? All right, we got 4 questions. You get 15 seconds each. Good luck. Here's your first question. Hop into your phone and select your answer, and let's see how you do. Which fun fact did I not mention today? Nice, the majority of you got it right. I did not tell you that I won $5,000 on Lingo back in the day. I think it was 2002. If you're resourceful, you might find the clip on YouTube, but I wouldn't give it away that easy. Awesome. All right, let's see how we're doing on the leaderboard. Wow, Simba and Daba Laba coming in hot. All right, question 2. Okay, no pressure, but I'm expecting 100% on this one. Don't let me down, Trojan family. Majority of you got it. Good. Lead with your strengths. Let's see how we're doing. Wow, Ethan taking control of the board. Simba and Dabalaba still not far behind. Hey, Yellow Bunny, you made the top 10. All right, get a screenshot if you want it. All right, next question. What can you do to optimize your outcomes? Absolutely. Next, oil change. Okay, we got some funny bunnies in the room. I didn't mention that. Hey, wow, I got so much swag. It's on the board. Holla. Look at B with the donut emoji. Oh, and you were the fastest. I love it. You get me with snacks every time. Okay, last question. It's still anybody's game. The faster you respond, the more points you earn. Which strategy did we not talk about as a way to own your own professional development? Excellent. That's right. You don't want to be that guy or that girl. Let me tell you. Don't do it to yourself. Listen, observe. There's often a why behind why things are done in an organization. So take cues before you start recommending. But again, as a previous slide said, when you do start recommending, come with solutions, not just problems, right? Point out both. All right, drum roll. Who's the winner? Chicken dinner. Wow, B, it's your moment. Take a screenshot. Congratulations. Thank you for your attention. Either you paid attention or you're a really good guesser, but congratulations either way. So well done on the quiz. You've now added 3 simple strategies to your career planning toolbox. And now here's your call to action. I challenge you to choose and use just one of these strategies and focus on it next week. Maybe you're already leading with your strengths, but you need to spice up your daily routine. Or perhaps you're already immersed in learning everything there is to know about your current employer, but it's time to focus on self-care and start getting a full 8 hours of sleep each night. If you're willing to accept this challenge, please tap the heart as your way of saying, I'm in. Wonderful. Keep it coming now. We need more buy-in than that, people. Let's get the numbers up. Yes. It's a simple challenge. Choose and use one strategy. There we go. There we go. Wonderful. Now, on the other side of that devastating layoff in 2009, I relocated to Asia and I taught English for a few years. I returned to the US and embarked on a grueling job search, this time equipped with my master's from USC. And after 8 months of searching, I landed at SpaceX and then Google and then LinkedIn, my dream companies, OMG. And the funny thing is that I've been able to share my experiences, the highs and the lows, on stages all around the world, from my hometown of Los Angeles all the way to Budapest, Hungary. Without that plot twist, my story would not be nearly as interesting. And despite the plot twist that you're guaranteed to encounter in your career, your story can still have a happy ending. Now here's your gift. It's the work from home new grad swag bag. Take a screenshot or check chat for the link. I'm sure they'll mail it out to you as well. It's a simple bit.ly work from home USC swag bag. And you'll get the slides from the presentation, which I'll upload a little later today so I can get your real reactions and your real feedback from the word clouds. And it'll include those 30+ resources that I mentioned that I've curated just for you over the past couple weeks. So download, share, and enjoy. It'll be live for the next 30 days. Trojan fam, it's been so much fun spending the last half hour with you. Please feel free to get connected on social media and fight on.
Thank you so much, Maisha, for joining us today and for so many pearls of wisdom. Your comments on leading with strategy, or leading with strength, excuse me, using our creativity, optimizing outcomes, looking for a full-time job is a full-time job, embracing learning when we're at our respective employers, and knowing that even though there's a plot twist, there's something really good in the future as relates to our careers. So we have to keep on keeping on and fight on. So thanks again, Maisha, for joining us and discussing how students can navigate this virtual space, and for actually giving us the analogy of turning lemons into lemon bars. We love that. Our next program will begin shortly and focus on how you can maximize your presence on the Trojan network. And also, Maisha, thank you for those new grad swag bags. We're going to enjoy those as well. So stay tuned and we will start our next session shortly. Thanks. Okay, well, we are now moving on to session 2. As part of the Trojan to Trojans Networking Day, we want to make sure that all of you all are well equipped with the skills to maximize your presence on our brand new Trojan networking platform. We call it the Trojan Network. This brings me to our next program, Maximizing Your Digital Presence. You've created your resume and you've uploaded your LinkedIn profile. Now what? With an influx of resume submissions online to messaging, informational interviews, gaining insights on the Trojan Network, how can we really maximize our digital presence and really leverage the USC Trojan family and the Trojan Network? It is now my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce my colleague at the Career Center, Lauren Opgenorth, who is our Associate Director, Internships, and Experiential Education. Lauren?
Great, thank you so much, Lori. I do appreciate that warm welcome and introduction, and I'm delighted to be with all of you here today. I certainly do look forward to showing you the Trojan Network, as well as giving you some strategies in order to really enhance your experience. And just like what has happened for the previous session, if questions do come up, please send them in and the team certainly can assist with them, or if there's anything that I need to discuss, I'd be more than happy to do so. But before we get started, I just wanted to recognize the fact that everyone's here today, taking time out of their busy days in order to help you with where you are at this point in the process. And really wanted to recognize that, as Patrick mentioned earlier about this concept of the Trojan family, this is one of the most powerful networks really worldwide. And we're so lucky that alumni want to pay it forward to you and give you purposeful connections and share advice and really help out this next generation of this Trojan community. And so in knowing this, USC has this virtual platform that will allow you to connect with these alums. I know sometimes the challenge is, well, where do you even start? You hear the concept networking and you think, okay, how do we do it? What does this process look like? Through this portal, you are going to be able to speak with alumni who are so extremely eager to help you out, to give you some insight, to really work with you, 24/7, because it is an international platform indeed. And so with that, what I want to do is really try to tap into this knowledge and expertise known as the Trojan Network. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go through a brief PowerPoint to show you how you're going to access it, and then dive directly into that platform. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen. Is it coming up for everyone? Hopefully you can see it. Great. Well, I am going to, yes, I did get the confirmation that you do see the screen, so that's wonderful. What I would like to do now is show you through this path. So what we're going to do specifically is first lead you to the home page. In order to access the Trojan Network, you're going to be able to go to the Career Center's webpage, careers.usc.edu. Right here under the Students tab, excuse me about that. There we go. Right underneath the Students tab, this is where you are then going to see the Trojans to Trojans initiative. And then to sign up for the Trojan Network is below. You might be thinking, wait a minute, I've just, graduated. Why am I going to sign up as a student? We want you to sign up as a student because there's going to be some additional features that you're going to be able to use on the platform. It's going to give you a little bit more assistance in finding those alums who are going to be able to directly connect with you. It's also going to help with the access piece. So I guarantee you it's going to streamline it a little. So if it's going to save you time, it's going to be worth it for sure. So then next slide, this is, once you click the Trojan Network, you're going to get to this sign in screen. If you already have an account, on the right side, there will be the sign in tab. However, if this is your first time logging into the platform, select that giant join the Trojan Network button. You can't miss it at all. When you get to the next screen, this is when the pop-up's going to show. And I know sometimes you might think, ooh, I'd love to be able to just forward some of the information through LinkedIn or Facebook or just my email. Again, make sure you indicate the USC Net ID for students because it's going to pull all that data directly from the university. It's going to be less information for you to input. When you do that, you know this page very well, so sign in with your USC credentials. I do know that some of you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, my degree, has conferred. I was going through commencement in May. How long am I going to be able to have access through this? You're going to have access at least through August. However, we will be in communication of when your account will transition from a student to an alumni account. So just want to let you know about that. Next up, it's going to launch you directly into this page about adding some of your personal details. Again, it's going to confirm that you're a student. Here are your academic qualifications, but then this is where you could add a little bit more detail about yourself. We highly recommend that you update your photo. Again, you don't want to just talk to just no one. You want to make sure you have your professional photo there, maybe something that you've used on your LinkedIn account. And you also want to highlight your headline. Now you'll notice there is a default of student at the University of Southern California. However, there's going to be several, if not thousands of people who are going to indicate that. Instead, think about something that you can add as far as what are you known for? What can you offer? How can you show that credibility? This is something that a potentially one of these alums could become, a supervisor, or they might lead you to other options. So you want to make sure that you're marketing yourself appropriately. So we've got that, and also indicate your location. Just know this location is actually something that would come up on a mailing address or Google Maps. Don't indicate neighborhoods. Sometimes people want to get very, very specific, and that's going to affect it. So just make sure you keep it general, but just know that by putting this information in your profile, it's not going to limit you. If anything, you'll be able to make those changes later on. On the next screen, this is where you're going to add a little bit more detail about yourself and what that involvement might look like. What are some of the different clubs or organizations you were a part of, whether it was maybe, USG, some of the different student assemblies, and then your extracurriculars. These are the different community groups. Were you a first generation student? Maybe a transfer student? Maybe you have military active duty or you're a veteran. Any types of those specific communities that have been acknowledged, we want to be able to include that because that could help in finding some of these connections to speak with. And last but certainly not least is the professional responsibility agreement. This is where we want to make sure that everyone's using their best judgment. They are being appropriate and professional and not utilizing this for personal gain. When you agree to that, sign off, and it'll launch you directly into the home screen of the Trojan Network. Now at this point, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can switch over to the interactive piece of the live platform. So let's go ahead and pardon me just one moment here. All right, we're going to switch up the screen. And I know it might take a couple seconds to get to that home screen. If I can get a confirmation for how that's going. Let's see, just want to make sure. All right, great. Thank you so much, Lori. Do appreciate that. So once you've logged in through that quick process, this is where it's going to launch you. this is what I want students to recognize, is that on the alumni piece, you're not going to be able to have this matching quiz, but this is a student feature. So based on how you've indicated in your profile, you will see, you will be able to do this matching quiz. And for the purposes of this demo, you can then say, okay, well, in addition to Los Angeles, I also want New York. Here are some of the other additional extracurricular activities, as well as some of those industries. And what you'll notice is then when you hit save, then your 5 top recommendations will be refreshed. What's nice is that for each of these, you can either click on their profile to get a snapshot of what some of their experiences have been. You could even bookmark them to maybe save for later. Maybe you're just kind of going through that exploratory phase and want to gain some initial insight, you can do that. Or if you would like to message someone, you can click on message there directly and you can do so. I'll talk a little bit about that more, but this is kind of like a quick snapshot of here are going to be your first 5 people that you can come into contact with. Also, wanted to highlight a few other features. For any of these new connections, they are all saved specifically here under Nurture, or if you want to, you can access them from this envelope up here on the right side. For any tasks that would be completed, these are things that can focus on maybe with anyone you've connected with, you have developed a list of goals. Maybe you've wanted to share a copy of your resume and look at different drafts. If that was something that you set up as something like a project or something to accomplish, then it would be indicated over here in your task, so it'll help you stay on top of that process. And it's really nice to know that it's all then contained within this platform. Last but certainly not least, we've got our different posts and resources, and these are going to be the different pieces that you can also dive into. For the discussion board, this is something where you might do a post or you might share a post. So definitely at 12:30, this is where you can do that. And then research, there's a lot of really great articles out there that I'll discuss in just a moment. But in addition to this quick snapshot, what I like to really focus on is the networking. Again, I know you're thinking, okay, well, are these people going to help me? What is this going to look like? All of these alums have come in to help mentor, to help support you, to connect you, to give you some additional advice as you navigate life after USC. So what's really exciting is that on this homepage, this is where you're going to see, you can see actually how many people are online now. This green dot indicates specifically they're online right now. You can hit the chat now. Well, not for Manny, but for Nathan, either keep changing and switching up. They know about the Trojan Network Day is happening, and so they're very excited to get involved. But what the solid green dot means is they're online now, and you can do chat now to be connecting with them directly, versus there is a green outline dot that's something that means they've been on recently. Oh, is the screen frozen? Let me see. You know what I can do? I can do, let me do the stop share feature, and then I'll share my screen again to make sure that we can get that back live again. All right.
Hi, Lauren. This is Ashley with the Alumni Association. We actually had a great question here from one of our attendees. It says, I signed up a few weeks ago and I'm able to see matches, but how can I go back and change something in my profile?
Great question. Thank you so much, Ashley. So over here on the right side, you will see your picture, and then there's the drop down. I don't want to freeze it, but if one of the first links on that drop down is my profile, so you can go in and make those updates accordingly. So we've got that. Is it coming up or has it been frozen? I think we're all set then with the online active users. Great, wonderful. Okay, so I won't be clicking as much because I want to make sure that everyone can see the page, but just want to let you know that once the networking does start at 12:30, this is where you can do the chat now. Just know that whether you click on the chat now or the let's connect, there will be templates that are there in order to assist with that language. Just a few things to think about. I know sometimes people will say, hey, so-and-so, make sure you use a proper greeting like good morning, good afternoon, hi. Hey is sometimes what horses eat. So I always give that as the recommendation. Also, if at any point in time when you're messaging or chatting, and you use the word job, when that does come up, that will actually, then there'll be a pop-up that says, I see that you've used the word job. Rather than asking directly for a job, let's build a rapport. Let's see what we can do in order to nurture that relationship before we can certainly advance with that. So that's something that's pretty exciting that'll help keep you on track. But just a little bit more insight from this networking page, whether it's going to come up with some of these automatic ones. You can also see down here, it's going to connect with you based on your industries. So I had indicated business as well as education, and there's going to be a number of different features there. So that's something that we want to make sure that students and alums are aware of. You can certainly search by either location or industry, or maybe you want to search by a company. You can do so within this search box. You can also set search alerts over here. There is the card view, which gives you the nice snapshot. There's also a map view. So when we talk about lifelong and worldwide, it's great to see all these Trojans that are helping out fellow students here. Also want to indicate under more filters, this is probably another one of my favorite features because you can actually search by help topic. So whether you're thinking about going into graduate or professional school, maybe you want some help with some of the different career or industry trends, maybe you're wanting some introduction to others in the field or mock interviews, that's an option. Also transitioning life from transitioning to life after school. So that's really exciting as well. Also wanted to indicate that there's so many different ways that you can connect, and sometimes just the hardest part is, okay, where can I find these alums who are going to be actively engaging? Again, they've all volunteered to help you with this process. And once you've selected either the chat now or the let's connect, there's actually going to be some verbiage to help start that conversation and see it continue. So that's pretty exciting. I know I'm running up on my last couple minutes, so what I want to do is certainly make sure that people are aware again with the discussion. Feel free to add to that discussion. Feel free to respond to previous ones. I know there was just some recent ones talking about in response to what's going on with this global pandemic and hiring, so feel free to engage with alumni through that way. Within the resources, there's been a lot of great information in regards to demystifying networking and how to gain some additional strategies. There's also some virtual recruiting tips. And then there's also the importance of networking in particular. And so also one of the other great features is this share piece. We recognize that people are getting a lot of different emails and they're getting information a number of different ways. Through the share tab, you can actually send a email to a fellow Trojan who is maybe not utilizing the platform, but can certainly benefit. So that's something we want to think about. Also, what you want to do is maybe even share this information through social media. So whether it's being shared through Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, feel free to share that information. That's another really great resource. But really just to reiterate, I would suggest that as you're going in and working on your profile, make sure that you are intentional with what you're indicating in order to get that stronger connection. Also, make sure when you're doing your matching quiz, really think about what are some of those industries you're thinking about exploring. Ashley, is there a question?
Yes, I have a few actually coming in.
Oh, great.
So one question is, can others view when I bookmark someone, or is that private?
That's just private for you to maintain that. I know sometimes people think that they might not want to share that information, but that's just for your record keeping. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Another question is reaching out to matches within 48 hours a requirement? There was a statement when registering for T2T, but Lauren mentioned being able to bookmark matches and reaching out at a later time.
So you can, so what'll happen is depending upon when you change what's in that profile, it's going to come up with different matches. So if you've bookmarked it, it's going to then stay in your bookmarks until you unselect it. But just know, I'm trying to see that question there in particular. It's something that will constantly be changing and such. You don't have to do it within 48 hours. We are asking for alumni to respond within 48 hours, and they are getting notification on the platform to respond if for whatever reason there has been a delay, but that is something that we're certainly addressing.
Awesome. And then can you change your headline later if you get a new position or job?
Absolutely. Just like LinkedIn, you can change that headline. We know that certainly for students who are utilizing the platform as continuing students versus as alums, there's going to be changes, and even with different, in this virtual environment, it might change. And then once things go back to more of an in-person model, anytime you want to change something, going up to your picture into the first little drop down, which is my profile, you can handle those changes there.
How do you, and then another question is, how do I get the matching quiz again?
How do you get the matching quiz? So what'll happen when you first get to, and I don't want to push it just because I don't want to get kicked out of the system. If you go to the home screen, it's going to be that big giant box right up at the top. And you'll be able to fill out specifically the location, the industry, and your extracurriculars.
Awesome. And then another question is, how much did you assert yourself and push the envelope when reaching out to alumni that you would view as a potential employer? Is it inappropriate to attach your resume to an initial message?
I would suggest holding off on attaching your resume until you've actually met this individual. You don't, if sometimes the concern is if you send out your resume with that initial interest, it looks like you're applying for a position. So we would suggest, let's have that interaction. Certainly, I always tell students when you're done with an informational interview, you can always say, wow, this has been really great. Do you have any other suggestions? Would you maybe take a look at my resume? And then start it from there. Have a little bit of a foundation with that relationship before you extend it out.
Awesome. And this is a really great one. When would you recommend using this versus LinkedIn?
Sure. We get this question a lot. So what I say is sometimes on LinkedIn, you know, they're two different platforms. However, I think that this one is going to probably give you a quicker response just because these are all alums who want to go in and mentor, provide that advice and feedback. You know, definitely, you know, there are certainly strengths to LinkedIn, and I'm not putting it down in any way, shape, or form. I just think that in light of our current situation and what's going on, alums know that this Trojan Network is this new platform that we want to share and help to connect students with alumni. And so it's a really great way to get that first initial connection. Certainly you can use both, but I'd suggest utilizing the Trojan Network first in order to get a better response or a more timely response.
Okay, awesome. And then, so I think a few last questions. Is this only available for the class of 2020? I think there are a few questions about how current students and graduates can take advantage of the program. And then related similarly is, if I registered as an alumni already, can I go back and change it to a student?
Okay, a lot of questions in there. So current students can reach out to alums, and alums can reach out to fellow alums. So that's how the platform is set up. You cannot switch from an alum to a student account because the student is using the single sign-on. I would say for that person in particular, if you do have questions, you can email our Career Center just at careers@usc.edu, and we'll handle that. But essentially, this platform is available to everyone within that Trojan family, student and or alum.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that covers everything. And then if there are more chats, Lauren's going to stay in so she can answer those in the Q&A.
Exactly. No, these are all great questions. More than happy to assist. I want to make sure we're just being timely, but just a couple of things, you know, making sure you've updated your profile and matching quiz, engage with the alumni because that's what they're here for. That's their purpose. Participate in the discussion board as well as share it with others. And I really hope that you will engage with the alums and you can develop these professional relationships. I really thank you for joining us on today's Trojan Network Day, and just want to say, fight on.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us today and for that informative session on our all-new Trojan Network. So we hope that at the conclusion of the program today, which will be 12:30 p.m., that you will actually go onto the platform and connect with alumni. And you can do that by direct messaging them, posting on the discussion board, or starting a live chat. So next up is our third speaker of the day and our last speaker the third speaker of session 1. We have 3 more speakers for session 2 coming up, and you're welcome to attend both sessions. Okay, our last speaker will be speaking about the different, how we communicate differently among the generations. For the first time ever, there are 5 generations in the workplace, with workers from 18 years of age to 85 years of age. People all across generations are connecting more than ever. but also are experiencing challenges such as miscommunication or misunderstanding, etc. Learn how to network effectively across generations. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our fellow alumnus, Mr. J.D. Roux, who is Senior Vice President, HR at Activision and Blizzard. J.D.?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. It's really a pleasure to talk with all of you today about this very important topic, as hopefully you go to the Trojan network and network across the different generations. There we go, I appear to be sharing. So you heard a little bit about me. It's important that as we talk about this topic that we all understand that we understand the world through our education and experiences. So that's a little bit about my background here. I started in corporate strategy after I graduated from USC, and then I ended up moving into human resources because I'm really fascinated about organizations and helping people particularly find careers that best fit their skills, experiences, and capabilities. A note as I go into what I assume will now be 20 minutes of discussion, getting us all finished by 12:30. My views and opinions do not necessarily reflect those of Activision Blizzard, but what I'm sharing with you today is on the basis of my human resources experience and what I've noticed, not only in how different generations network across each other, but communicate in the workplace. So what will we cover in the next 20 minutes or so? I'd like to share some background on the different generations or in the current workplace that we went over in the introduction. Talk about how we initiate, perhaps differently, a conversation with different generations depending on who you're approaching. Talk about how people tend to communicate differently based on what generation they're in. How you should follow up with individuals, and it does vary a bit from the younger generations to the more experienced generations. And then I really want to move quickly to the Q&A. So I heard a lot of great questions at the end of the last session, and so I want to save at least 5 minutes of time to answer any questions that you may have, and I encourage you all to use the Zoom Q&A function so we can collect those in real time. Don't just wait until the end. So before I get started on the different generations in the first place, just wanted to share some impressions that are out there on Generation Z. I know that not all of you are necessarily part of Generation Z, but I know that many of you are. So you see here things that I see online, things that I hear in the workplace, such a short attention span, not really good with face-to-face interactions, not committed or as loyal as us older generations. And yes, I do feel a little bit old now, and now that I recognize that I graduated 16 years ago. So these are stereotypes, right? And so as I talk about the different generations and share my experience and what I've researched, it's really important that we not stereotype any generation, but recognize that there's a range of approaches out there and everybody is unique. So you might see some people in the traditionalists, they tend to communicate in a similar way, but not every traditionalist or baby boomer has the same communication preferences, has the same networking preferences. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we adapt to individuals, maybe starting with what we know about them, not only their generation, but their career, their background, and how we really build a strong relationship across the different generations. So with that, why are we having a conversation today about generations, given that I just said that especially in today's environment and everything going on in the country and the world, we don't want to stereotype. We want to recognize and appreciate people for their individuality. Well, we do know that generation matters for a variety of reasons. So first off, life stage and career stage, there tends to be a difference in how you network and how you communicate depending on what your priorities are in your life, whether you're single, and people who tend to graduate from college do tend to be more on the single side, versus if you're later in your life, you might have a family, you might have other networking groups that you're a part of, and so you're juggling more and more priorities the older that you get, is what I tend to find. Your career stage, and so I hate to break it to many of you, but many of you will find that the higher that you go and the further that you go in your career, the busier and busier that you tend to get, and so the more efficient that you have to be in terms of how you communicate. Major events play a major role in how different generations communicate with each other. And let's face it, with COVID-19 and other things going on, we're definitely in the middle of some major events that 10, 20 years from now, the newer generations will know that we experienced this and think about how it impacted how we view the world and how we communicate with each other. Those three things don't tend to actually define a generation as much. They tend to more reflect the age of the generation. So the millennials, which I'm a part of, we will reflect more the baby boomers and the traditionalists as we go further on in our careers. So that's important to acknowledge. But the bottom two things that you're seeing at the slide here, the preferred communication media and styles and how we built our networks, especially after we graduated from college, those things do tend to be very unique from generation to generation and will continue to change, especially with the prevalence of technology as we move more into all of you, Generation Z and beyond. So with that in mind, I'll talk a little bit about what are the technology preferences in addition to the Trojan network and how we're interacting with different generations. What is the length and the frequency of interaction that different generations tend to prefer, right? So recognize that some people in Generation Y might reflect more of the baby boomer stereotype and vice versa. And then talk a little bit about communication styles that you'll adapt as you go along. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we initiate a conversation, a relationship with someone on a networking basis. I'd like to start first with just defining the generations as I see them. So in the upper left, you see that there are the traditionalists, or they're sometimes called the silent generation. I don't really like that because I don't find them to be silent at all. They have a lot of really important things to say. So I'll call them traditionalists going forward. And they were born before 1946. And they are, as mentioned in the beginning, still in the workplace, and they have a lot to share, and it's incredibly valuable. Then there are the baby boomers. These tend to be the senior executives, well, not all of them, in the companies today, in academia today. They were born between 1946 and 1964. We move on to Generation X, 1965 to 1980, Generation Y, 1981 to 1996. That's again what I'm a part of, and then Generation Z is beyond, so to speak. And I'll note for all of you that importance of not stereotyping, even though I'm a part of Generation Y, or the millennials, as we're often known, a lot of how I prefer to communicate is actually more synonymous with Generation X. And that's on the basis of I'm kind of very early in Generation Y, and I tended to be more friends with Generation X and have similar experiences as them. So that context is really important. So let's go back to talking about how we might initiate a conversation with different generations. And so as we go to the, what I don't call them older, I call them more experienced generations in top, you will unsurprisingly see that they do prefer to interact face-to-face or maybe with a phone call. That's on the basis of how they all built their networks when they were earlier in their career and earlier in their lives. They're still very good with technology. They're still good with email, but you might find that they like to switch things over, or they provide more rich information if you engage them face-to-face or with a phone call. Given a COVID-19 world that we're in today, electronically is the safer way of doing things, and you might start to interact with them on the Trojan network, on LinkedIn, via email, and then you might suggest, hey, I have some questions, I have some things I want to ask you. Would you prefer to do this over an electronic medium, or would you prefer a phone call or even a Zoom chat? That might even be better. And you may find that baby boomers and traditionalists actually will say, yes, that's a great idea. Let's set up a phone call, or let's set up a Zoom so that I can share more and be more helpful to you. As we move into Generation X and Generation Y, what we're experiencing right now within those generations, they're either building their families or have had family for quite some time, and they're juggling lots and lots of different priorities and are not quite as experienced as the baby boomers at managing all of that. And so there tends to be this efficiency in how Generation X and Generation Y communicates, not only because of their life stage, but also because of the technology that all of them grew up with, which is very different from the baby boomers and the traditionalists. So with that, we find that Generation X, they prefer email to save time, and they will prefer to meet kind of when needed, whether that be in a Zoom or in a WebEx chat right now, or in person when it's finally appropriate. Now, Generation Y, where Generation X might have preferred email, Generation Y is fine with email, obviously, but they might also prefer other media. So LinkedIn, if we're talking about professional networking, is a good place to do it. The Trojan Network is even more preferable than that. But if it's more of a social networking, then you might find them more than other generations, as you all know, on Facebook, on Instagram, and they're very comfortable building social networks there. And we also know that, especially with the newer generations, like Generation Y and Generation Z, there tends to be less of that dichotomy between professional relationships and social relationships. They are very fluid in moving things from social to professional and vice versa. What the research does say about Generation Y, by the way, is that meetings and phone calls might be outright avoided. So you want to try to initiate a more electronic relationship first through email or otherwise. It doesn't mean that a millennial will never meet with someone live. It just means that they tend to respond more favorably to that electronic communication. It's how many of us grew up, right? America Online way back in the day for the earlier millennials, starting there and then moving into a more in-person or face-to-face relationship. With this in mind, I put on the right side of the slide where you might find us in the world. And so, not so surprisingly, the traditionalists and the baby boomers, they're very used to attending live networking events. And USC, in my experience, I've been at this for 15 years now, has some of the best live networking events that you're going to find. We're really, really good at networking. And so when we get back to a world where we're past COVID-19 and you're able to meet with other Trojans, preferably in a city near you, then that is a great way to network. And you're going to find that baby boomers and traditionalists, they're just very used to that. It's how they had to build their network when they got started with their respective careers. You're going to find Generation X and Generation Y are also at those networking events, particularly if they are a Trojan, but they tend to be more selective about the events that they go to because, again, they're juggling lots of priorities and they're also used to multitasking and using different forms of technology. And so it's more about what they want to do on their own terms and their own time. And so you may see them more infrequently, so to speak. Versus other live networking events, work social interactions that you'll find a baby boomer or a traditionalist at. All right. So one of the more covered things in terms of differences across the generations is how they communicate. Not wanting to stereotype again, but we do find that there is a spectrum of communications that varies from traditionalists all the way into Generation Y and Generation Z. And so traditionalists, they tend to be more formal. Many, not all of them, prefer formal titles when you're first addressing them, Mr., Ms., Mrs. And when you're communicating them, even in a place like the Trojan Network, they might want to see something more resembling a written letter. So there are paragraphs. Grammar is important. Use complete words and sentences because that's how they started to build their network, and that's the form of the communication that they took earlier on in their lives. Going on to baby boomers, it's still more formal. It's not known as formal as traditionalists. They might not want to be referred to as Mr. or Ms., for example, but they still want well-written, thoughtful, professional written communications, even in networking. And so keep that in mind as you're going out there. It might feel a little bit more formal, at least at the very beginning. You're kind of making a request if you're the initiator of the networking relationship, and you're in a way making a proposal of how the relationship will work. And baby boomers tend to follow more than others that type of construct. Then we move into Generation X and Generation Y, again, recognizing the context of X and Y. Generation X is known for being pretty direct, not rude, but a bit more back and forth and just kind of getting to the point rather quickly. Want to know, okay, what is it that you're seeking? How can I help? Is there any way that you can help me? It's still very polite. It's still professional, but it's not the kind of flowing communications in paragraph form that you might expect from a traditionalist or baby boomer. And then you have Generation Y, and there was actually a bit of a shift versus a spectrum as we move from X to Y. It's not true of everyone, and Y, especially the earlier millennials, but Generation Y is known for being less formal, known for using less words And so you might not want to draw entire paragraphs in the first conversation with them. They don't necessarily want to read a whole letter. They're going very quickly from task to task. It's therefore a bit more transactional, a bit more communication. Think of a text conversation, but that's probably not how you want to start a networking relationship, but there's more of a back and forth in the beginning as you're starting a relationship with a millennial. And then each word matters more because Generation Y and Generation Z as well is known for being very efficient in their communications. We're known for communicating in 140 or 280 characters, and therefore every word has a lot of context to it. So with that in mind, know that your words might mean even more to Generation Y and even some in Generation Z. Scan the message, however short, that you're sending to make sure that it has the right context and that you won't be misunderstood, especially in written format as you're communicating with them. You know, there's a variety of ways that you can network with all of these different generations. I find that the traditionalists and the baby boomers, they have a whole lot to share. And if you ask them for their experiences and their background, even more than other generations, they have a lot of beneficial things that they're going to share through their stories when they have the time and when you're able to interact more face-to-face with them. Of course, they can also provide connections. Many of them are hiring or can help you get hired. But the traditionalists and the baby boomers, they tend to have more of an expectation for an existing relationship before they go out and help you find a job or connect you to another person. Contrast that from Generation X and Generation Y, where you want to really offer to be helpful to them while being respectful of their time. And of course, they want to be helpful to you as well. X and Y tend to be quicker to consider an individual part of their network if they have a shared experience, an affinity group, some kind of connection that doesn't necessarily have to follow a long conversation with them, right? And so where baby boomers and traditionalists, for example, might be a bit more hesitant to connect to someone on LinkedIn until the conversation has happened, X and Y is known for doing that more quickly and in Facebook having a lot more friends. All right. Preferred follow-up. And so what I'll say in networking is follow-up is very important, not only the immediately after you meet someone, but that ongoing relationship that you want to build with those you network with. And so traditionalists, this is well known, they appreciate written notes, even with all the communication technologies that we have today. It will stand out when you're able to send them a note to their office or, when appropriate, their home. And the same goes for baby boomers. So in my role, I spend a lot of my time working with senior executives from this generation, and I've noticed that candidate interactions and networking interactions are perceived differently from the baby boomers that I serve versus myself when I'm having the same number of interactions. And so for those in this generation, they also appreciate written notes, and the more kind of context to it, the less generic it sounds, the more impactful it is. I have heard executives in this particular generation say, oh, such and such sent me a thank you letter, but it was really quick after the interaction, and it seemed like it could have been sent to anyone. And that resulted in more of a negative perception of that other individual. Versus me, I didn't mind as much when I saw almost the same exact email, right? It was kind of a form letter that was sent to all of us. So keep that in mind. The context is very important, not only generation, but just the various expectations of those that you're interacting with. Generation X and Generation Y, what I'm going to say is keep it relatively brief. Do add context, try not to be overly generic or send a form letter wherever you have the time to just highlight the special interaction that you had with someone in the generation. It's good across the generations. And then if there are any follow-up actions, especially highlight that for X, but you might consider doing that across the generations as well. Because face-to-face is a more common set of interactions with traditionalists or baby boomers, when you see them, you'll want to go out of your way, perhaps more than others, to say hello and connect with them. Versus X and Y, we are more used to, say, annual, semi-annual, whatever is appropriate, electronic communications. Just acknowledging, hey, we have an ongoing relationship, check and see how you're doing, this is what I'm doing. That's a very important part of networking. So I have moved through this very quickly. And so if you haven't been putting in your questions in the Q&A box, please start doing that right now because we'll have about 5 minutes to go through all of those. But I wanted to share with you some general impressions and tips for all of you, especially if you're earlier in the networking cycle. So the important thing is to be authentic and really focus on building relationships. It will feel more comfortable. And so for you, you don't want to really worry about, oh, I need a job right now. And then you're really going out and interacting with a lot of people for the specific purpose of finding a job. Networking is something that you need to do through your entire life, regardless of whether you have an urgent need at that moment. You'll find that it will definitely help you when it does come time for you to be connected to someone or find that next job. So definitely focus on relationships. Those relationships should be two-sided. So no matter what generation you're in, there's always something that you can do to help the person that you're meeting. And so even if you say, hey, this person's a CEO, I don't know what I can do to really offer them, you might have a better understanding of technology, especially newer ones than they do. So be open to that. You might just have more context about people your own age or from your own city. And maybe they're looking for that kind of context because they don't understand it as well. So make it a very two-sided relationship and recognize that it's not just about jobs. It's also about mutual learning. For me, I have leveraged more from my network for information about what's going on in my industry or in my function rather than finding a job for myself. All of the jobs that I found happen to be through the more traditional applying for a job, interviewing for it, and getting it. But I reach out to my network every month, if not every week, to find out information, what's going on. Being a human resources professional, as COVID-19 was really picking up in the United States, I relied heavily on my network, the Trojan network and otherwise, to help me understand what I could do, what the options were, and what worked, what didn't. For those of you who are still looking for a job or soon about to look for a job, if you can help someone by filling a job position that she or he is hiring, state as much, right? You need to be authentic, so don't kind of just mask what it is that you're looking for. Build a two-way relationship, but have that intent and say, hey, I'm really interested in a role in your company. Can we talk about this? Perhaps the most important thing I can share as it relates to generations is this fourth bullet on this slide. The suggestion to mirror the person with whom you're networking in an authentic way. And so if you notice that someone, say in a different generation, is trying to switch the medium, so in other words, switching from technology to more of a live interaction, not only do that, certainly, that's the most helpful way to interact with them, but the next time you're trying to interact with them, maybe start there. So if you start on email and then they move you to a phone call, maybe the next time you want to talk with them, you start by calling them instead of the email. If someone appears less formal, then consider, so professionally, still part of the Trojan network, adopting their style or adapting to their style, right? And so I know that there are plenty of baby boomers who say, I'm not formal, I don't like that kind of formality, and it annoys me when someone younger than me addresses me in a very formal way. I personally don't like when people call me Mr. Roux. That's just a personal preference. I don't hold it against anyone. And I also think that I'm maybe not quite as formal as others in my company. But with that in mind, see how they're communicating and see how you can adapt your style to relate to them in an authentic way. Important and related to what I just said about Mr. Roux, if someone signs their communication with their first name or however it is, use that. And so for me personally, I go by JD, and so if someone addresses me as Jonathan, which is completely fine, and I then in my next communication with JD, I'm kind of hoping that person will call me as I've invited them to call me, which is by the name that I am using. When we do go back to live networking, and I hope we get to do that soon, more in person, for many of you who might be more introverted or interacting across generations, which can feel very uncomfortable at first, try to bring others, your friends, into that dynamic. Don't just stick together, so you don't want to be that group of 3 or 4 that isn't interacting with anyone else, but it's much easier to go into a live networking situation in a group and then interact with other groups than individually wherever possible. As I've talked about generations throughout this time, I really want to highlight that your own generation, your own graduating class when you do graduate, is very important because they understand your context. They understand the experience that you have gone through, and they can, A, connect you to various people that can be helpful for your purposes. And then they can also help you understand what's going on in a way that might resonate more with you. Networking is what I will say is it's kind of a hit or miss game at times. It's like any other relationship, not all of them really work out. I want all of you to recognize that 99% of people, especially those in the Trojan network, really want to be helpful. It's just that a number of people are juggling all kinds of priorities. I personally get 400 emails a day, and it tends to be around 20 to 40 emails asking for a meeting, and I have to be really selective in how I use my time, even though I want to help everyone. It tends to be the case that when a Trojan is reaching out to me, I'm more helpful than in other cases, but in any case, I'm certainly trying to prioritize. So if you don't get a positive response from someone, but there was something about their experience, their background that interested you, go out and find someone similar, whether on the Trojan network or LinkedIn or any other electronic platform. The people today in this world have a lot more resources at hand than I did when I graduated from college, and that's a benefit to all of us. With that, happy networking. For those of you from the class of 2020, congratulations. I hope that you greatly enjoy your new job or the job that you're going to get soon. I'd like to move us into Q&A. This is normally where I would provide my email address, but I'm not going to do that because during the last section, I signed up for the Trojan Network. I want everyone to find me there. All right.
Awesome, JD. Do you want me to read the questions out for you? This is Ashley from the Alumni Association.
Yes, Ashley, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. So the first question is, you mentioned offering to be helpful to Gen X and Gen Y. If we're talking about networking, how can you be helpful to them? I wasn't sure what that meant.
Yes, and so keep in mind that you have context and information and your own network that can be helpful to any generation. And so I'm thinking about my own experience as I was approaching people who are older and thinking, oh, they're so much further along in their career. I don't know a lot. I don't have as much work experience. And that's not all true because I understood my own generation better. And in my case, I was reaching out to people who were in business or were in marketing. And so they had, in some cases, asked me questions, hey, how would you, they were really talking about my generation, but how would you perceive this thing that we wanted to do in our company? And I was able to respond. So I'm a data point. I'm information that is helpful to them. And of course, I have my own network. And so in many cases, people are looking to hire, if we're talking about companies, and maybe they're not looking to hire me specifically, but from my USC time or somewhere else, I can help them find someone else around my age from my network that can help them out. So just be very thoughtful about that. Analyze each person individually, like I mentioned in the beginning, and try not to stereotype. Don't be overly pushy in how you're offering to help. You're still, in many cases, asking for something, but recognize that you have value, and it's definitely a two-way street.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is how to send a physical thank you note to a person during COVID-19. Any recommendations?
That is tougher, and in this particular stage, I, in many ways, discourage physical thank you letters for that reason. We're just trying to stay safe. You can still, if you know their work address, you can still send physical mail there, and hopefully it gets rerouted to them. If it's more of a personal, not professional interaction, you can, of course, still send it to their home. I think these days people are more open to electronic communication than physically written communication.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is, being an international student, I'm not used to a lot of interaction or small talk. How should I develop good conversation skills at a professional level, especially at a job?
Practice. It's a great question, right? And we talk about international students, but it's also very applicable for those who are Americans who then try to find jobs outside of the United States. And so different cultures have different ways of interacting. Study that. And the best way to learn how to do that is just to throw yourself into it, and practice makes perfect, right? So you can ask questions of those that you trust in terms of your own communication style and how you can do better at that. And you can also have those people who you trust put you into those social or work situations, you can acknowledge that, hey, I don't have as much experience, or English is a second language, and people appreciate that context and are able to adapt to it. But be confident, right? You're part of the USC Trojan network. You've learned a lot from this university, and so you have a lot to bring to the table. Don't let any insecurity stop you from interacting in the workplace or in the networking realm.
Wonderful. So another question is, in your role as an SVP of HR, how does HR see recruiter services? Is there an advantage or disadvantage for applicants to use recruiter services? I am in a senior to mid-level management. There are various recruiter options like Gated Talent, Blue Steps, and Russell Reynolds. Please give us your insights and experience with these recruiters.
Yes, and I do have experience with those recruiters and a broader set as well. And so it's a fantastic question. What I find is that the further along you get in your career, the more applicable those particular recruiting firms are. And the reason why a company like mine might use them is because those firms have networks that we within Activision, Blizzard, or otherwise do not. And we're trying to hire someone pretty senior or with a very specific skill set that might be niche as quickly as possible. And so we're using those firms and we're basically paying them for their network so that we can get someone in-house faster. If it's a very senior job, a very niche job, it's more helpful. I've had a number of recruiter services companies approach me for junior or more mid-level roles. For me personally, what I'll share is I like hearing from the candidate more directly in those scenarios. And also as an SVP of Human Resources, I'm less willing to pay someone else for their network at those levels. There tend to be a lot more relevant candidates at the junior and mid-level stages. And so I encourage just more of a direct application at that particular stage.
Wonderful. I think we have two questions that I can kind of combine here. So I think folks are really trying to figure out how they can be authentic when they're networking, especially in the case of doing so online. So, you know, is it helpful to just send a DM through the Trojan Network platform? How do they communicate effectively and just really make sure that that authenticity comes through an email?
Well, what I really like about the Trojan Network is it gives us an opportunity to indicate our interests, right? And so to be more authentic, if you genuinely find an interest or an experience that is similar across you and the person with which you're trying to interact, that's great. And you can mention that depending on the generation. You might not want to go too in detail about that interest. You're just proposing a conversation topic, right? Now, as we move outside the Trojan Network to more common networking platforms, LinkedIn and otherwise, again, you're trying to make something not generic. You're trying to add context. And so putting in 2 or 3 sentences about why your background, why your experience is relevant to the individual is definitely helpful and will feel more authentic. You don't want to, so for example, and this is something I used a few years ago, if you're trying to connect with a Trojan, you don't want to bring up USC football if you haven't at least been watching the games, right? So that's not really authentic, right? You're making an assumption that a USC Trojan will want to talk about football, which might be true, but you should only raise that if you also are knowledgeable about that. There are many things about the USC experience that you can bring up that is applicable without raising something that you don't know about that is inauthentic, right? So hopefully that distinction that I just made will be helpful. Sometimes you can't really determine based on the information you have on the other person, how you connect with them at all. In that case, just be a bit more direct, your interest in connecting with them because of their background, their experience, their company, and then go from there.
Wonderful. Another question is, do you have any suggestions for effectively planting the seed that you're job seeking during an informational interview? I worry about the risk of making the conversation awkward because you feel like you're making an ask.
Personal opinion, I know when people are asking for informational interviews, at least with me and my colleagues, that they're looking for a job, if not immediately right now, then sometime in the near future. So it's okay. Have the informational interview and then provide that there's been a conversation and a dialogue throughout. You might ask in the end, thank them for the information and say, hey, I have an interest in this and this conversation has confirmed it for me. Do you think that I might be a good fit in your company or in your organization? And so that kind of question, A, tells the other person that you're interested in a job. B, gives them the opportunity to provide what will likely be positive feedback. People don't want to say, no, you're a bad fit for my company, right? But allow them to provide some feedback. And then if appropriate, many people will at that point say, oh, let me connect you with a recruiter, or let me connect you with a hiring manager. Keeping in mind that networking is not just about going to one person and stopping there. In many cases, their connections can be helpful to you as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to combine two of these questions because I do think they are related. So someone was asking, what do you do if you don't get matched up properly with someone in the Trojan network? Or, if you notice that there isn't an industry that you were interested in while creating your profile, which I think kind of goes to, do you have to network with folks who are working in specific fields that you're interested in?
I think we all want to build a network that is diverse, is what I'm going to say to start up with. And so pay attention to what the Trojan network is suggesting. And even if you don't have a direct job interest in the person that they're matching you with, consider having a conversation, right? They might be able to connect you with someone more relevant to what you are looking for. But other than that, the algorithms are only as good as we set them up. And so even if you find that you're not being set up on the Trojan network or otherwise with the people that you're looking for, do research, find the people that you're looking for. They're almost certainly out there.
Wonderful. I know we're kind of short on time, so we're going to have to hop onto our afternoon session. And I know we have 2 other questions. So what I'll do is I'll be sure to send those questions to JD, and we can share the answers to those with all of our wonderful attendees. And I will kick it off to Lori to close us out.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, JD, for those wonderful pearls of wisdom about how we can communicate more effectively among the generations and how to network, improve our networking interactions with the generations, and to focus on relationships. And I love what you said about 99% of people want to help you, especially if they're in the Trojan family. I now encourage you all to sign up for the Trojan Network and put what you've learned this morning and this afternoon to practice. Send direct messages to alumni, post on the discussion boards or live chats with alumni. So let's move on over to the USC Trojan Network platform now, and then session 2 will begin at 1 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all 3 of our alumni panelists. And as we say at USC, fight on.